Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome Cuson. My co-host, as always, is Brian, and tonight we are going to be discussing the second in the Dollars trilogy, a fist for a few dollars more. Please leave a 4 or 5 star review on Apple and Spotify to get those algorithms going. Please like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for notifications when the videos go up. Again, we are continuing Sergio September. Brian has stated that this is one of his all-time favorite movies. This is for a few dollars more, and this is a pretty historic movie for a number of reasons. Not just because Clint Eastwood is slowly becoming a bigger movie star, but we also get introduced for the first time to Lee Van Cleef as he makes his first appearance in a Sergio Leone movie, and he basically had a second career because of this movie and because of this franchise. As we will talk more about him when we get to the good, the bad, and the ugly. But Brian, this is very exciting times, and I know that you have wanted to discuss Sergio Leone for a very long time, and I know that you are really happy to be on this one.
Yeah, so basically the reason I picked this as my favorite of the three, and I'll just state it right off the bat, is like the Indio heel character, the bad guy in this movie is just tremendous. And if I compared all the villains in all three movies, this is the strongest villain with the most depth, a lot of like layers to his character. And not only that, I like the idea of Lee Van Cleef coming in, and we don't know if he's a bad guy or not, and you kind of have to figure out what's going on, and the fact that he is actually a good guy compared to where he's a straight up bad guy in Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where it's clear. I like this idea that he comes in kind of this gray kind of tone, and we don't know whether to trust him or not. Clint Eastwood, the man with no name, doesn't know whether to trust him or not. And I feel like that dynamic adds a little spice to this, this trio, so to speak, compared to Good, the Bad, the Ugly, where it's just straight up everyone has their own kind of MO, and it's all about the gold, and that's all they want. In this case, we all assume it's a bounty, but the last 5 minutes of the movie, Jerome, it completely turns into a revenge movie, and you don't even realize it. And I love that twist at the end. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But man, the whole time it's building and building to this, like, oh, they just want the money, right? They just want the money. And then you find out that Lee Van Cleef's sister is the one that was raped by Indio in that flashback throughout that plays out throughout the whole movie. And once you finally reveal in some kind of off, like, color, kind of dialogue, it's like, oh, that was his sister or whatever, and it's like everything just starts clicking, and you realize you wanted revenge the whole time. And I love that twist to it. And Indio is just so like a diabolical son of a bitch in this movie. You can tell, like, Eddie Kingston. We mentioned Eddie Kingston last week. This is the movie where I think Eddie Kingston really studied this guy and looked at him. It's like, if you can get the eye movement down, if you can communicate with your eyes, you can become such a better actor. And I think he does that in this movie so well.
I mean, this is what Sergio Leone does, right? I mean, we're going to talk about this a ton when we get to Once Upon a Time in the West, but I think you see a lot of that here. I mean, Lee Van Cleef is such a welcome addition to this. I think, you know, so much of the first movie was Clint Eastwood. This really was a showcase for him. I mean, I don't necessarily think any of the other performances were bad per se, but I think the issue for me is that, it has a very limited scope, and clearly there's not a big budget to do a lot of these things. But to me, what I think works about this is that you have somebody who can kind of stand up to Clint Eastwood and is able to mess around with him. And I mean, I think he just brings a lot of those elements that you want. And I think it actually gets even better. I think the dynamic gets better, even though I don't know that Lee Van Cleef's character is as interesting in the good, bad, and the ugly. But what I think works in the third one is the dynamic, and what that movie is ultimately building to. And and I think it's tough. I think this movie being in the middle, like, this is the middle portion. So sometimes what happens when you get into franchise mode, like, the second movie can often get a little lost, especially because it's kind of a bridge to something else. But I think what makes this movie so special is the fact that it can stand up to what else is going on, in terms of bringing in these new characters, kind of having a really good story. And again, Sergio Leone is really kind of taking this very seriously as well. And this truly does feel like it stands on its own, and it feels different from the first one, but you see a lot of the same elements. And I think that's what Sergio Leone is so good at in his westerns, is that they don't all feel like they're the same. They feel, again, they're the things that he does in all of them. The score obviously is going to be very similar. But the thing about, to me, what makes these movies special is that, again, they're doing different things and they're not, he's not, he doesn't have a formula, I would say. Like the first movie was an hour and 41 minutes. This movie is over 2 hours. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is about 3 hours. For a few dollars, or I'm sorry, Once Upon a Time in the West is about 2:45, and all four of the movies I think kind of feel different. I think some of the characters definitely start to feel samey as you progress, but again, these movies are not formulaic in the way that I think somebody who would direct like a John Ford, not as formulaic as some of those movies.
And I would argue, kind of commentating on that, like this idea that this is the Man with No Names movie. It's not really his movie. He's more of like the side character. He's kind of like the Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China. He's not the main story. The main story is Lee Van Cleef and his tale of revenge. And we slowly kind of see that as we kind of, kind of like peer back and kind of look back, and it's like, okay, the movie starts with Lee Van Cleef. It ends with the gunfight between Lee Van Cleef and Indio. It doesn't end with the gunfight with the Man with No Name, because he's actually kind of comes in at the end. It kind of does like a guest referee spot and said, we're going to call it down the middle now. And then it was almost like a Stargate 97 moment where it's like, we're not going to have a screw job finish. We're going to have equal footing, and both of you are going to like have an equal chance to kill each other. And, of course, Lee Van Cleef comes out on top because he's the better shooter. And then he kind of reveals to Indio at the end of his life that, you killed my sister, or you're responsible for the death of my sister. And we're going to get into that because it kind of ties into some of the themes about toxic masculinity in this movie. But yeah, just the whole buildup and the finale is not with the Man with No Name, and Clint Eastwood is like the guest referee. So what does that tell you? It tells you that he's not the main character in this movie, even though he's marketed as such. But if you look at the script and the way that the movie plays out, it's Lee Van Cleef that's actually the main character, which I think kind of draws me more to this movie than the other three, because it's kind of subversive in terms of like who the main character actually is. Because if you follow the screen time, it's like Lee Van Cleef does have more screen time, I think, than Clint Eastwood, because at the beginning of the movie you introduce him as the kind of the central character. So it's kind of a switch. It's kind of a switch up between the last movie, because the last movie was all focused on Clint Eastwood, and in this case, it's like it's almost like a mentorship kind of role, almost like Iron Man and Captain America. You know what I mean? And of course, anytime two protagonists who are heroes meet up for the first time, what do, Jerome? They fight each other, and in this case, they had a
That's
good
the
fight,
rule.
and yeah, and they kind of had this gunfight at the OK Corral, not trying to shoot each other, kind of like one up each other. And like I mentioned last week, this ties into the timeline. So if you look at the timeline, this does take place in the second movie of the trilogy, just out of order, because obviously The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is actually the prequel to all this. So if you look at the costume and the bullet holes, this matches the bullet holes in Clint Eastwood's hat in Fistful of Dollars, meaning that this takes place before Fistful of Dollars. So that whole timeline actually does line up based on that YouTube video that we watched recently. So more eye-opening stuff to this
So
trilogy.
the
Like,
so the for the so to be clear, like this is being told backwards. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly actually takes place first, even though it's third.
uh, correct. Yeah, that's the way that I finally interpreted it and figured it out. And it took a while for me to figure it out, but that YouTube video, I got to find that video again and put a link to it. But it actually makes sense because of the costume changes and whatnot,
I'm
and the
a big
timeline.
fan of that. I mean, like again, I don't think like we're not really telling the kind of story where you really need to worry about that. I do appreciate it though, and I would love to see a superhero movie take the. I don't know that we've seen something like the lead superhero kind of takes a back seat and is a side character. I would kind of like to see that presented and kind
I
of
mean, I
set
guess
off.
Civil War attempted something like this, but Captain America was like the main focus and got a lot of more screen time. So,
I mean, I'm
but
saying to
yeah,
not
that's the
have the
closest I can
superhero
think
be
of.
the focal point, like have the superhero be a side character and have the humans be the main character.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe you kind of get with this, because there's a lot. I mean, you can tell like they put the superhero feel on Clint Eastwood, but that older, mature guy. And there's even a line that says, "I used to be you, and then something happened to me that all changed," which is alluding to his sister's death. So there's that older cowboy feel to it, which I really like. It's almost like when Terry Funk coming in and teaming up with like a Tommy Dreamer, that kind of vibe. It feels like that to me. and I really dig it. And I think that's why I like this movie a lot, because they kind of come together after their fight and
I
kind of
mean, if
put
you
this
don't
plan
think that
together.
You don't think Terry Funk saw himself as like a Clint Eastwood type figure, then you're crazy.
I think he sees himself as Lee Van Cleef, to be honest, based on the way he portrays himself in his 50 year, that whole like uh 50
I
and
mean,
over crazy
maybe a
run.
little bit of type A, a little bit of type B, perhaps. I mean, but clearly he sees
But
himself
yeah,
like
yeah,
this
and you
vision
can
of the
feel that
old
vibe.
west.
The vibe of that movie, the vibe of this movie feels like that for me, especially when he says like I'm 50 years old and I've seen more than you, and he calls Clint Eastwood a kid, and it's just so like striking to see this grown man being called a kid by an even grown older man who is just as a badass. You know what I'm saying? So I love that dynamic to it, and that's why I love these two characters coming together. And they even do the math for you. I love when they do that, because they mention that there's 14 bad guys, and then you start counting backwards once they start killing them all, and then once you get to zero, it's like, oh, we're at zero. They killed everybody. So I like that dynamic of it all. And there's some mixed bag in terms of like some plot elements that are repetitious of the previous movie and stuff, but I mean it's kind of similar, but it's like a different journey with these different
It really
characters.
does
So
have a very different vibe than the first one. I mean, I think again, this movie has a little bit more of a budget, so the scope definitely feels a little bigger. Like instead of just this very small area of land, like we're kind of more in a traditional old school Western town, and we kind of expand even beyond that. So I think again, the scope of this movie is bigger, which is good. Like I think that is a good thing, but I think that I mean, for me, I look at this movie as a logical extension of the first one, but in so many ways, I think that this movie does a great job of just building up the characters and building up the plot line. I think the thing about Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is it is too long at almost 3 hours, but the build up to what and the payoff is so good that that's why ultimately I think it's still the best in the trilogy. Even though, like, if you ask me, like, what is the best movie, like pound for pound, minute for minute, I think this might actually be better. But the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly just builds. I mean, the finale of that is so amazing that like I can't deny that the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and the score of Good, Bad, and the Ugly as well. Like that undoubtedly makes an impact. I mean, look, and this score is really good too. I don't want to take anything away from it, but like you cannot you cannot top what happens in the third one.
And just a little side note, you probably don't remember this at all, but they use this music in Kick-Ass, and I kind of recognized it when I saw Kick-Ass, and I was like,
Oh,
"Is that the music from one of the trilogy movies?" And I had to look it up, and it's from this one in particular. And there's it's the scene where not Kick, Hit
Hit
Girl goes
Girl,
crazy in the high rise tower. That's that scene, and she just goes crazy, and all the bad guys they play this music. So I like that little tie in there. Of course, I'm a
a very cool
fan of
scene
that movie.
has been done
Yeah,
to death in so many other super at this
right.
point.
But I think this particular music really like hit that kind of tone for me, because I was like, oh, that's that Clint Eastwood tone. I'm getting the vibe of this, so I really enjoyed that, and the little crossover they did there. And this music is probably going to be lost in the shuffle compared to the score of Good and the Bad and the Ugly, and for a fistful of dollars. But it's just so good, the soundtrack, I feel, because the way they use like this little clock, what do you call it? Those little clocks that play the tiny
Yeah,
music. Oh man, they use it so well in this movie,
there's
and
I like the diegetic diegetic versus the non-diegetic. I think Sergio Leone is really good at that.
yeah, and then it's just so eerie, because it kind of every time they play it, it relates to Indio and what he did in the past, and you find out that in the past he invaded some rich couple's home, killed the dude, and raped the wife, and the wife was so like distraught that she
Yeah.
killed herself, and it's just like this haunting thing, and it's like Jesus Christ, like what an evil person. And then this idea that
Hmm.
every time that he kind of remembers it, he goes back to this PTSD, and he's got like this deep look, like he's like staring into space, but he's really remembering the haunting images of that night. And it's like this haunting toxic masculinity that I bring up before, mixed with like the PTSD, mixed with like evil, and it's just like so many layers to this character that you don't get in the other two movies when it comes to the villains. So I just really appreciate that, and the way that they use the music and the setup and the way that he kills that dude, that traitor at the beginning of the movie that turned against him, and he finds him in the family, and he kills the baby and the wife. It's like, oh my god,
It's
like
pretty
truly
intense.
evil. Yeah, and that's why I love this character, because it's like he's got so many layers to him compared to the character by Ellie Walsh in Good, the Bad, the Ugly. You kind of get his motivations, but this case, it's like this is so layered and
I
nuanced.
would love to know what audiences in 1966, 67. Obviously, this is international, and it didn't hit the United States until a little bit later. But I would love to know the people who are used to the John Ford westerns and the John Waynes, like how did they feel watching something like this? Because I mean, this is so different. This is, we are dealing in those shades of gray that I think that to me is what makes westerns good. I mean, I think the western genre, you really are only being able to tell like three or four stories with the genre, but I think the way that Sergio Leone is able to dabble in the shades of gray, that's what separates him from I think a lot of westerns, and I think that's why he
Yeah,
is so good at it.
and I guess based on kind of the research I was kind of gathering, is like this is one of the first times that a bounty hunter is portrayed as a protagonist. Because in the previous movie, he's not a bounty hunter; he was just coming through the town to kind of put the town or the gangsters against each other. So this is one of the first times that you kind of see like the hero role as a bounty hunter, and it's kind of like conflicting because this idea of a bounty hunter is like, what, you're glorifying a murderer, but in this case, in the old west, it's like do or die, right? So
Right.
you gotta get up the evil because it's just gonna take over like a cancer, and that's kind of the message, I guess.
Yep.
And when it comes to like a bounty hunter, it's
Yep.
like the lesser of two evils, and the good for the people. And it's like, well, you're gonna let this guy live, or you're just gonna kill him and collect the money and just let good take over. And that's kind of the message. And it's very much that shades of gray, because it's like, wow, we're really rooting for what this is what the Star Wars fan would become when it comes to Boba Fett, right? This idea of we're cheering for a bounty hunter. But I guess it kind of started with this Clint Eastwood character, especially in this movie, because he wasn't a bounty hunter in the previous movie. But this idea of like this bounty hunter being this good guy really was probably shocking at the time. And then it turns out that, like, he's actually a good guy killing bad guys, and that's kind of the message that Sergio Leone was kind of delivering here. As well as there's another subtle thing that's kind of throughout the movies, is that he's kind of he's anti-train. It seems he's anti-railroad, because it seems like all the
Which
messages
is
in
a
the three movies, like,
fascinating turn of events.
yeah,
It
like
is
it's like a subtle
fascinating.
message in each one, where how like the town got worse because of the railroad, as opposed to like living it up and becoming like an economic boom town. So there's various kind of like conflicting views on it, which I find fascinating, because it almost seems like Sergio Leone is the guy that would like have his home in the middle of a freeway because he's the only guy that didn't get paid off by the government because he refused to give up his land. Does that make sense? Like he's that kind of
Yeah,
guy, it
yeah, it
seems like.
does.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
if there's a train in a Sergio Leone movie, something very bad is going to happen to that train or on the train. Like it's just
Right.
it will.
And in the beginning of the movie, Mortimer is like Douglas Mortimer, Lee Van Cleef. He's like, we're passing through this town, but it's not going to stop there. It's like, oh, it's going to stop there, and he just pulls the thing, and the emergency stop happens, and they go, sir, you're not supposed to get off here. It's like, I'm getting off here, and then they're just like, okay, forget it, see you, bye. We don't want to mess with you. So that was again, and then the old man in the movie talks about how the train just come and just kind of destroy the town, because it just made more bounty, or it made more people like come into the town and try to rob the town or something like that. So it just kind of brought more evil to the town than it did good.
And
So
we
that's kind of the
will
thing with
we will be
Sergio Leone
hitting upon
movies.
this with Once Upon a Time in the West. We will definitely be coming
Oh
back
yeah,
to
that's the big theme in that one too, and then
I mean
especially about
that's I mean that
property
is
value.
that's like the ultimate realization of that theme.
Yeah, no, but it builds up perfectly for that story as well, because it has nothing to do with this trilogy, but it's all about property value and defending your land, which is essentially the heart of like all
Yep.
Western themed
Oh,
things.
it
So it just
absolutely
makes
is.
sense.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean thematically, I think he is just a really interesting director. And again, he kind of is able to frame things in different ways to keep it entertaining. I mean, I think the fact that we are talking, I mean, this is a guy who only really directed like 7 movies, but literally like 4 of them are regarded as like some of the best westerns of all time. And I will probably make the argument in 2 weeks that maybe he made one of the best movies ever. But like this is a really good one. Like it's really unfortunate that this movie gets lost in the shuffle, just because again, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is like the movie from this franchise. I think Once Upon a Time in the West has the reputation for being a really good movie, but my God, this movie is a solid 8 out of 10 for me. And I know you're going to be even higher on this, but I mean, this is absolutely worth watching on its own.
Yeah, for sure. I got it like a 9.5, just because the performances are so much better than the first one. The added dynamic with Lee Van Cleef, and you can tell like this is a different story or screenwriter than the previous film, and he's gonna write. I forget his name, but he writes this film and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But you can tell like it's a much different approach to the plot than what we got with the first movie, because the first movie was again a direct rip of Yojimbo, so you got to kind of follow that script. So once you
Yes.
break away from that, you can kind of just go and explore, and that's what this movie does. And then Good and the Bad and the
Yeah,
Ugly goes
he
even further
certainly
with that.
does.
So I love this idea of like each movie gets bigger and bigger, right? In terms of scope. But I think this kind of fits that middle ground where it's like that you got a lot of people, but it's not over the top. Where like the next movie goes like way over the top with extras, and just so many people. But in this case, they kind of narrow it down. And not only that, I think the casting is great because okay, I'm not a big fan of the actor Klaus Kinski because he's a son of a bitch in real life and a
Really, I
predator
did
and
not.
whatnot.
Oh shit! I mean, I wish I could say I
Yeah,
was
just read about him and
surprised,
his
but
daughter. Just read about him and his daughter,
I
and
mean,
not just that
I
stuff
would rather not, but it looks like I'm gonna have to. But
and not just the
it's
stuff
really
with him and
unfortunate.
Werner Herzog having that dysfunctional relationship over their years together. But he's in this movie for what 5-10 minutes, and he just plays like the perfect role, right? They casted a role where it's like a guy has to look crazy with bad hair and looks deceiving and just has this crazy unhinged look. Bam, Klaus Kinski,
He
perfect.
is the kind of guy that you don't like. He's the kind of guy that you don't really see in movies anymore because we don't believe in putting ugly people in movies. And I mean, he's the kind of guy that would get squeezed out. But I mean, he's really good. Like he is definitely memorable.
Yeah, and if you ever seen Aguirre Wrath of God, I've seen clips of that movie, folks, and my goodness, that is something that I don't think you should watch alone. To be honest, I think you might make you
Yeah,
suicidal at the end of that movie. But but that's just Werner Herzog and his relationship with Klaus Kinski, and that's a whole different discussion because he's got some fascinating stories with that director and their relationship. But yeah, him in the 10 minutes he was in this movie, just with the humpback and everything, just fit that what that role needed to be. So I was glad to see him in it.
for sure. All right. That is for a few dollars more. Next week, of course, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a movie that is well regarded as one of the greatest westerns of all time, perhaps one of the greatest movies of all time. And I think we're going to talk about, I mean, again, I think the buildup is really good. There are definitely some parts of this movie that I think fall flat, and we will get into that next week. But behind the scenes, Brian and I have been kind of reviewing over what October and December are going to look like, and I guess kind of how it's shaken out is like Brian's the Halloween guy and I'm the Christmas guy. I don't know how this happened. I guess it's because I'm the former Catholic, so I guess I end up being the Christmas guy.
Well, I have been on my Hammer horror binge the last couple of Halloweens, so that kind of makes sense for me as well. I wanted to fit in some Hammer horror, and we're going to get that. And I think some of my selections are going to be kind of surprising by Jerome because I think one of the movies is going to blow him away, and I think they should remake it in the modern A24 era. But
We will see.
yeah, but the one thing I will reveal is that the right match is perfect because it took me a while to figure it out. I was going to either do a Giallo movie or or a slasher movie. I kind of settled with Freddy versus Jason, and what better way to compare Freddy versus Jason than Stan Hansen versus Vader?
Yeah, I'm still debating on which Christmas. So in December we're going to be doing the new Christmas canon, and we're going to be kind of analyzing some movies that should be a part of your regular Christmas rotation, but have like come out in the last, let's say, 15 years or so. So we're not going to be like going through some of the oldies. We're going to be hitting on some new, really good movies, and our YouTube channel we're going to accompany it with the not quite Christmas canon, the movies that perhaps fall a little bit short. So that's going to be fun. I still need to figure out what the right match is going to be for the month of December. Like, it's weird. Like, obviously, wrestling has a lot of Halloween themed matches, but they don't really have, and like with a Survivor Series, like you could argue there's like Thanksgiving themed, but not a lot of wrestling themed Christmas matches.
As I recall from my days watching WWE in 2014. I think there was a Christmas Street fight. Don't quote me on that. It could be very, very terrible because I mean that a Christmas Street
I
fight
mean,
on
look,
Raw in
there is a
2014.
Santa Claus. There is a Santa Claus. There is. I know ECW used to run something on 34th Street or whatever. I don't know. But we'll
And then
figure something out.
there's Norman the lunatic dressed as Santa Claus in WCW in 1990. You also got I think the Candyman. Oh no, wait, Brad Armstrong. That was Halloween. My bad. Sorry. Candyman Brad
Man,
Armstrong is Halloween season.
man, and yeah, a lot to look forward to. For Brian, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.